Hello and welcome to yet another wrestling channel. My name is Rich and it's been a fair while since I did a good old prediction video. This channel is about trying different things, and so I'm going back to doing one of those. Apologies if you prefer the other stuff that I do. I'm going to try and get back into that soon as well. When I first started doing this channel, I was talking about AEW Elevation. Because I hoped that nobody would watch for a while I tried to get good at sort of doing this sort of thing. But I want to get better at doing stuff like this and talking to you. And I'd also love to hear your thoughts. So if you make it through the video, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what I'm going to talk about today. And that is the AEW roster, most specifically the GTA characters that now inhabit their roster. There's been quite a lot of some petty and quite major criminal activity in AEW in the past week. All Out happened this past weekend, and a lot of people have been talking about some of the more gruesome parts of that show, and I wanted to predict what is going to happen with the most dastardly of criminals who are hashtag all elite. And so I'm going to talk about only three. There are quite a few, but only three. I even saw somebody on Twitter, and if I can find it, I'll put it on the screen, make the point/joke that after All Out, half the AEW roster is either in hospital or prison. So, and that seems quite apt. And I wanted to get this out before Dynamite because who the hell knows what else might happen. But here we go. So the three that I want to talk about, and we're going to start with Daniel Garcia, who is wanted for reckless pile driving after the match with MJF at the pay-per-view. Now I'm talking about Daniel Garcia here on the assumption that he stays with AEW. There has been some talk over the past few weeks that he might well be WWE bound should he decide to go there. And a lot of people have speculated that he would be sort of headed for NXT, which probably makes sense because, I mean, he's a young guy, so he would fit among the most beautiful roster in all of wrestling, so it seems. If my girlfriend is watching, please stop. But for the purposes of this video, we're assuming that he's staying with AEW. It's Monday evening as I record this, and nothing has been announced as to sort of whether he's re-signed with AEW or if he's headed away. Now, thinking about what's next for him, at the start of the MJF Will Ospreay feud, there was talk about Daniel Garcia at one point facing Will Ospreay for the international title at Wembley Stadium. At All In, that was obviously never really in the cards. That was part of the storyline. But we could very well see Daniel Garcia rack some wins up, as he told Ricochet to do, on his way to an international title shot. I'd really like to see Garcia sort of earn some wins and maybe challenge Will Ospreay, maybe at Wrestle Dream. I think that's the next pay-per-view, isn't it? Part of me saying that is that I would really like them to hold off on the inevitable Ricochet match for as long as possible. And a good way of doing that would be to bring Daniel Garcia back to Will Ospreay and hopefully build towards a match between those two at the next pay-per-view. And if you really have to do Ospreay and Ricochet soon, save it for Full Gear, hopefully. There's a challenge for you, Tony Khan, which I know you're not watching. Save it for World's End, I dare you. Save Ospreay and Ricochet for World's End. Looking a little bit further into the future, sorry I got a little bit carried away there. Moving a little bit into the future for Garcia. The other thing that's coming up that I think could be really good for him is the Continental Classic tournament, which will be hopefully starting again in a few months. And looking at last year's Blue League table, which he was in, Daniel Garcia actually got the lowest points in his league. Not of the whole tournament, because there was a few people who got 0 points in the Gold League. But Garcia didn't fare all that well in that tournament. And this would be the perfect opportunity to show that they can do something with Daniel Garcia, to actually get him in that tournament again and rack him up some wins. Doesn't have to win the thing. Maybe has to get to like his league's final. But certainly doesn't have to win the whole tournament. But as long as he certainly puts in some good performances, and he really shows that when you look at last year's tournament and compare it to where he could be in this year's tournament, there could certainly be some huge improvement. And it's easy to forget that this guy beat Bryan Danielson, beat the current world champion Bryan Danielson. But it's easier to remember Garcia as the guy who does that dance. What I'm trying to say is that it's been very easy to dismiss Daniel Garcia, even though they've tried every now and again to give him some credibility. And I think they could really do that with the Continental Classic tournament. And so that is my prediction. And I really hope that they do something with the guy. Now, the second absolute crim that I want to talk about in this video is Jon Moxley, who is guilty for the crime of, he tried to suffocate Bryan Danielson at the pay-per-view, turning on him. Now, obviously what's next in his future is a Bryan Danielson feud after what he did at the pay-per-view. When I think about the prospect of a match between those two, again, hopefully on pay-per-view, I can't wait for that, because I very much remember their Revolution, I think 2022 match, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing them do that again. In AEW, it's been pretty well established that you have to earn a title shot in some way. Now, that's a little bit up in the air, because the ranking system seems to have died a death. The win-loss records seem to have died a death. They're not on the AEW website anymore, and they have been for the entirety of AEW until recently. But one thing that has seemed to be consistent is that in AEW you've had to earn a title shot in some way or other, either through the ranking system or through various opportunities that come around through the year, such as the ladder match for that big gold brass ring that I've forgotten, the Face of the Revolution ladder match, the Royal Rampage, which Darby Allin, more on him in a minute, won this year, so he's got a shot coming up at Grand Slam. Not to mention the epic gauntlet they did at Wembley Stadium, the casino gauntlet that got Christian Cage his money in the folder thing, because it's not a briefcase, is it? We did see last week Jon Moxley get on the microphone and call out Darby Allin, saying that he wants to talk to him, and as I mentioned a minute ago, Darby Allin actually has a world title shot coming up at Grand Slam, which I believe is September the 25th, somewhere around that time. And perhaps Mox might be trying to get hold of that title shot in some way. Maybe he's set to challenge Darby Allin for that title shot. Maybe he's going to threaten him with this new group. But there's a few different ways that Moxley could sort of either get that title shot or find his way to the next title shot. Or maybe it has happened in AEW that the champion has issued the challenge to prevent somebody having to earn a shot. So maybe Danielson will come back and he will just want his shot at Moxley for what he did to him at All Out. Either way, I think Moxley is heading towards a big pay-per-view match with Bryan Danielson. And I could even see him being the one to beat Danielson, maybe even at Wrestle Dream in Washington in October. And so that could well be the way things are going for Jon Moxley. Now, I don't totally know how much I really want another Jon Moxley world title reign. To be clear, he is one of my favourites on the AEW roster, or he was until he turned on my other favourite, Bryan Danielson. But one thing this would be is a heel Jon Moxley title reign, which is one that we haven't seen before. He is, I believe, a 3-time AEW World Champion right now. All of those being babyfaces, depending on if you're a CM Punk fan or not. But I could definitely see Moxley sort of putting the next generation over in a way. A new AEW World Champion for 2025. So that's roughly my prediction for Moxley. Not much of a punishment for the crime, but there you go. And finally, we get to number 3. It's hard to pick one single crime for this man. It's Hangman Adam Page, who just over a week ago burnt a house down and then continued to brutalise Swerve at the pay-per-view. One thing I think we can safely predict is that Swerve might not be around for a while, so therefore Hangman might just be in prison for the fire thing. that could be a way to sort of write Hangman off for a while if you wanted to do that. I can't really see them doing that, being serious. Suppose what I'm trying to say is, of the three people I'm making this video about, Hangman's future is the vaguest because, like I said, it seems like Swerve is going to be gone for a while, so you can't really continue that story. It would feel a bit odd if Hangman went after a title, especially straight away. So if Hangman was, he's completed his kind of turn to the dark side at the pay-per-view. He finally came out the heel tunnel, if that's a thing you notice, because I never do. Thank you, people on Twitter. One thing that I would like to see him do, which would kind of fit in with the character, but also not be a bit too off course for him now, is to see him go back after the Elite. So they had a few problems after Blood and Guts. You could draw on those again. One thing I was quite keen to see, hopefully, was Hangman have a match with Okada. I know I said I didn't want Hangman to go for any titles, and I wouldn't want it to be for the Continental title, but I do think that match would be really interesting. I can't see Hangman finding a partner, so I can't see him facing the Young Bucks. But maybe going after Okada or even Jack Perry, that would be really interesting. If he went after the scapegoat and maybe in some way is trying to sort of redeem himself by going after the bad guy. Speaking of redeeming himself, I also think there could be a number of ways that Hangman could try to do that. You know, there was a clear moment after that match, like as All Out was going off the air, when Hangman had this look on his face, and some have perceived it as like a realization of like what he's become now. You could take that one of two ways. You can continue Hangman down that path, or you could see him try to redeem himself. And while that might be an interesting idea, it seems a little bit too soon to see him on a redemption arc. In which case it'd be really interesting to see him sort of finish some unfinished business with one Jeff Jarrett. So, correct me if I'm wrong, the last time they interacted was at All In, where Jarrett decked Hangman with a guitar after he'd gone after Karen Jarrett, or he'd stared her down at one point, and then she grabbed his leg, distracting him for the guitar shot, and not eliminated him, but effectively took him out of the running for that gauntlet. I don't think we ever saw him again in that match before Christian got the win. And so it would be interesting to see, because they've kind of also dropped the Jeff Jarrett stuff as well so far. They've not really gone back to it since then. The whole Jeff Jarrett arc from the Owen Hart tournament of really wanting to prove himself and failing, and then wanting to inspire Bryan Danielson. It feels like that's kind of not had a proper ending either, and maybe like one more match with the Hangman could be the way to sort of end that story for Jarrett. The one thing that is quite clear about Hangman's trajectory going forward is that it's not very clear. Just depends on whether we're going to see him sort of go further into this new version of the Hangman, this evil version of Hangman, or if we're going to see him sort of see the error of his ways and try to correct himself. Either way, I think Swerve might not be back for a while, and when he comes back, I dread the idea of there being a fifth match between those two. So yeah, those are my predictions for 3 of AEW's most notorious criminals. If you made it this far into the video, I really want to thank you. If you liked this, I really would appreciate if you would leave a like, or even subscribe, or let me know, more importantly, let me know what you think. Please leave me a comment, tell me if you agree, if you disagree, if you think the background looks naff, if you think my sound's awful, whatever. I'd really appreciate some feedback. I'm trying to do kind of what I enjoy on this channel. That's kind of what it's been about from the beginning, just trying to sort of get my voice out there, and trying to communicate with other people and hopefully get feedback. And so I'd really appreciate if people let me know what you think. So that's it from me. I'm going to leave it here. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.